Hello and welcome to this lecture, and in this lecture we will learn how to basically go ahead and create a database structure like this in Firebase. So Firebase actually has quite a bit of different structure as compared to other traditional SQL databases. So in SQL databases you used to have data stored in tabular format, but in Firebase database is actually stored in a tree-like structure. So let's say in your application you want to save some kind of data related to users. So let's assume that for now you want to save names of certain users in your application. So for that, what you need to do is that you need to create a similar kind of structure in Firebase, so where your root node is actually users, and users is going to have a child which is going to be called as names, and names is actually going to have these values, which is Chris, John and Tom. So let's go ahead and learn how to create this kind of structure in Firebase. So let me just move this to another screen and let's go back to the application. So we are here in the Firebase console under the databases tag, and here what you need to do is that first you need to make sure that you delete everything in your database by clicking on the cross sign. And once you're left with this kind of structure, you simply need to click this plus sign. And what this plus sign actually means is that it means to add a new child. So whenever you want to add a new child, you click here, and every child is going to have some kind of name and it is going to have some kind of value. So right now what we want to do is that we want to create a users. So we will type in users here, and you don't want to assign any value to users. Instead you actually want to go ahead and add another child which is going to be called as names. So for that purpose you again click this plus sign to add up a child, and you create a child called names and you assign it some value, let's say Tom. And what you need to do now is that you need to click this add button, and as you could see, now the values are added up over here. So now what we need to do is that we need to figure out how to go ahead and add another value to this names field over here. So we are going to learn how to do that. So what we will do is that for now we will minimize this, and what we have is that we have the structure from the previous lecture, which is nothing but we have the edit text, we have a button here, and that's what we actually need. So here we are actually going to go ahead and enter the name, and when we click this button, what we want to do is that we want to make sure that the added name is going to be added over here. So let's go ahead and do that. So let's go to the Java code, and to the on click of that particular button, what we will do first is that we will go ahead and get a reference to that particular edit text. So edit text, let's name this thing as edit text name equals, typecast it to edit text, and then find view by ID, and that's going to be r.id dot, and I guess the name of that edit text is name. So I've actually replaced the name of this edit text or the ID of this edit text to name. So once we have a reference, the next thing which you need to do is that you need to get a reference to that particular root where you want to add this name. So here, if you have a look at the database, you first need to get a reference to users. So let's go ahead and do that. So in order to get reference to the user, we use the myref object. So myref equals database dot get reference, and we basically want to get reference to users. So we are going to add users over here, and now once we have a reference to users, what you need to do is that you need to get a reference to names. So names is actually a child of users, or you could say users is actually a parent of names. So in order to get access to the child of any parent, what you do is that you first go to the parent. So we already are here at the parent. Now let's go to the child by typing myref dot child, and we need to specify child name, which is names in this case. And then what we basically need to do is that we want to set the value of names to this particular edit text. So we type dot set value edit text name dot get text dot to string. So we have basically converted the edit text value to a string, and we have attached that value to the child, which is names. Now in order to see how this thing actually works, I am going to save this code and run my application. And in the meantime, I'm also going to show you guys the Firebase database as well. Okay, so the application is actually up and running on my device, and as you're able to see, this is what my screen looks like. And let me just also pull up the Firebase, and here let's go ahead and let me enter a name which is going to be called as Harry. So when I click this button, let's see what happens. So as you could see a change here, the name actually changed to Harry and the previous name is being replaced. But this is not what we actually want to do. What we actually want to do here is that we want to add a name without replacing the previous thing. So let me just go ahead and stop the recording, and what we want to do here is that we basically want to append a value and not set the value. So instead of using the set value method, what we do is that we add another method which is going to be called as push. So we will basically add push.setValue, and what that's going to do is that it's actually going to keep the previous value and it's going to add the new value. So after doing that, I'm going to basically save this code and run this application again. So I won't be showing you guys the application, but I'll show you guys the Firebase database and how the changes are reflected over here. So my application is actually connected, and let me just enter the previous name, which was Tom. So when I click this, as you could see, now a new value is entered to Tom, and as you could see, we have some kind of random thing over here. And let me just go ahead and enter another value, let's say Rob. So when I click Rob, as you could see, Tom is now still there and we have Rob over here, but again we have this weird looking value over here. And let me just go ahead and add up Harry again, and as you could see, we do have Harry, but again we get the same thing, that is we basically have these random things over here. So let's basically understand what these things actually are. So the issue with this thing is that let's say you are having a certain field and that field could contain duplicate values. So in order to avoid duplicate values, what Firebase actually does is that it associates every value with this unique thing right here, which you are able to see. So this thing is actually unique, it's in its own way, and that's why we actually get this value over here. So what this actually does is that it avoids duplicate entries in your database. So for example, let's say you have two Rob or two Harrys in your database, then the database is actually going to get confused. But you might actually think that if you launch an application, then obviously a lot of people are going to have common names. So how do you resolve that particular thing? So that problem is actually resolved by designing your database in such a way so that the things do not mix up with each other, and by keeping them separately. So this database structure right here is alright if you're basically going ahead and studying something new, but this is not the correct way to add data to the database or to structure a database. So in the next lecture, what we will do is that we will learn how we could go ahead and add multiple values to a particular field. So let's say you also want to store let's say Tom's username, his email ID, his name, contact, and everything like that. So we are going to learn how to do that in the next lecture. So this thing actually appears quite weird, but this thing is actually good because it avoids duplicate entries in your application, because if you have two Harrys in your database, they are going to be distinguished depending upon these unique values. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next lecture, where we'll be learning how to add multiple fields over here so that we could store different kinds of data related to people. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Thank you.